This vintage Tokina looked almost perfect. Spoiler, it wasn't. Welcome back to Lens Lore. I'm Millie, and today I'm taking you through the 5 mistakes I made when buying this vintage Tokina. I will share everything I did wrong, all the tiny oversights that turned what I thought was a great deal into hours of research, tinkering, and troubleshooting. If you love vintage lenses, or if you want to avoid some very avoidable problems, stick around. Alright, let's start with a mistake that led to many other issues on this list. I've had this Tokina for several years now, and I never could get it working properly. I bought the lens in person, took one quick look, and saw the glass was clean. The body looked great for a lens from the 70s, so I just assumed that everything else was fine. But what I didn't check was the focus ring movement, the aperture ring clicks, blade responsiveness, internal rattling, and full rotation of the rings. If I had, I would have noticed immediately that the focus ring barely moved, and there was a rattle inside the lens, which I later discovered came from a loose screw. The seller, of course, didn't mention this, and they had great reviews, so I trusted them without checking. What followed was hours of tinkering. I opened the lens several times, spent many hours trying to reassemble it properly, all without any prior experience repairing lenses. I figured I had nothing to lose, since it was already unusable when I got it. Eventually, I did manage to free the focus ring, and now it turns properly. But even after fixing that, 2 problems remained. It still doesn't reach infinity focus, and the aperture ring doesn't close symmetrically. This aperture issue is actually one of the reasons why I'm convinced the lens was dropped at some point. Here are some tips for you guys. Rotate all rings fully and check for resistance. Listen for rattles inside the lens. Check whether aperture blades open and close fully and symmetrically. Don't automatically trust seller descriptions. Verify everything in person when possible. If I had just brought my camera with me that day, this whole Tokina adventure would have ended instantly. But I didn't, and that tiny choice turned into a very long, sometimes frustrating journey. I found this lens on a local used goods site, and the seller happened to be from the same city. I was excited. No shipping fees. But I didn't bring my camera. I just didn't think about it. If I had tested the lens on the spot, I would have immediately noticed the focus ring was stuck and something was clearly wrong mechanically. Here's a tip. Whenever possible, test the lens on camera before buying. This next mistake cost me a lot of time and tinkering. After I got the focus ring moving properly, the lens still only focused to around 1.5 to 2 meters, that is 5 to 6 feet, for my imperially inclined viewers. So once again, I went back to troubleshooting. I learned that the focus helicoid on this lens has several possible starting points, and if you choose the wrong one when reassembling, you'll get the same short focus problem that I had. So I disassembled and reassembled the lens again and again, and honestly, I have no idea how many times in total. Eventually, the helicoid was correct, but the lens still wouldn't reach infinity. It was just shy of it. At that point, I thought, okay, maybe the adapter is at fault. I learned that cheap adapters, like my vodka, sometimes do have issues with empty lenses due to looser tolerances or machining quirks. The lens seemed to be finally assembled correctly, so of course the adapter had to be at fault, right? And this is where I got a fun idea. Why don't I just 3D print a new adapter? Worst case scenario, I break the adapter. Worst case, I break the lens again. But best case, I finally get my Brokina working. So I got the 3D printed adapter, tested it against the vodka metal one, and surprise! Neither adapter allowed the Tokina to hit infinity, not even at f8. I even tried filing the adapter down a little to get it to sit closer to the camera. Still nothing. Then it occurred to me, did I even test the adapters with another lens? Answer, no. Luckily, I have 2 other MD mount lenses that I got for future projects, so I decided to test them outdoors to check their infinity focus. And guess what? Both adapters worked perfectly with those lenses. They even overshoot infinity slightly, which is exactly what you want. Finally, I had my answer. The problem wasn't the adapters, it was the lens. Now I'm stuck. I tried finding a user manual or an exploded diagram so I could attempt one last reassembly, but so far no luck. I even emailed Tokina, and if they reply, I'll update the video. If you have a manual or you guys know where to find one, please let me know down in the comments. Here's another tip. Always compare your adapters with a known working lens. If only one lens is misbehaving, the lens is the issue. My next mistake was not doing the proper research before buying. What I didn't know at the time was that MD mount lenses aren't always consistent, especially when it comes to third-party makers like Tokina. I had no idea these little variations even existed when I bought it. When I got the lens, I was still pretty new to vintage photography and to photography in general. Later, after digging deeper, I found that some Tokina MD lenses have subtle variations. Tiny flange height differences, slightly misaligned locking tabs, or just pure mechanical wear from decades of use. Combine that with cheap adapters, and suddenly you have a lens that refuses to behave, sometimes not mounting properly, sometimes not reaching infinity. In my case, mounting wasn't the issue. Infinity focus was. Even stopped down, it just wouldn't reach it. Here's a tip. Check forums or groups for known mounting issues with your lens model. Don't assume all lenses of the same mount behave identically. Finally, I just didn't realize that cheap vintage lenses often hide surprises. This Tokina looked clean, sharp, and well kept, but beneath the surface, the focus ring was stuck, infinity focus is still unreachable, and one aperture blade remains asymmetrical. Vintage lenses have lived long lives. They can look mint and still hide major mechanical flaws. Still, I honestly don't regret buying this lens. Despite everything, it's a beautiful lens for portraits and detail shots. I love its character, even without infinity focus. And I've learned so much from trying to fix it. Here's what I learned. Sometimes you just have to accept a lens for what it is. Some problems can be fixed. Others are just part of vintage charm. So those were the 5 mistakes I made when buying this Tokina. And as you probably realized, most of them were completely avoidable. But honestly, this lens took me on a fascinating journey, and I'm grateful for it. Every problem taught me something about vintage glass and lens mechanics. Even when a lens has flaws, troubleshooting can be part of the fun. And that's what makes vintage photography so rewarding. Have you ever had a similar issue with a vintage lens? How did you fix it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more vintage lens adventures and plenty of hands-on tinkering. Till next time, bye!